Good afternoon, Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Kucinich, and members of the subcommittee. I'm Dan Ikenson, Associate Director of the Herbert A. Stiefel Center for Trade Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. Since 2009, I have followed closely the events surrounding the auto company bailouts and bankruptcies, and I am grateful for the opportunity to share my concerns regarding the lasting implications of the GM bailout. The views expressed today are my own and should not be construed as representing any official positions of the Cato Institute. With help from some pundits and various media outlets, the administration is pitching the narrative that the auto bailouts were successful. The evidence in support of that conclusion seems to be limited to the fact that GM has been profitable over the last 5 quarters and that Chrysler has repaid much of its debt to the U.S. Treasury. But calling the bailout successful is to whitewash, 1, the diversion of funds from the Troubled Asset Relief Program by 2 administrations for purposes unauthorized by Congress, 2, the looting and redistribution of claims against GM's and Chrysler's assets from shareholders and debt holders to pensioners. 3, the unprecedented encroachment by the executive branch into the finest details of the bankruptcy process to orchestrate what bankruptcy law experts describe as sham sales. 4, the costs of denying Ford and the other more deserving automakers the spoils of competition. 5, the costs of insulating irresponsible actors, such as the United Auto Workers, from the outcomes of an apolitical bankruptcy proceeding. 6, the diminution of U.S. moral authority to counsel foreign governments against similar market interventions. And 7, the lingering uncertainty about the direction of policy under the current administration that pervades the business environment to this very day. I think if the president wants to take credit for saving the auto industry, he should also take responsibility for the regime uncertainty that has persisted during his administration, since much of that uncertainty, which is manifest in weak business investment and hiring, flows from lessons learned from the auto intervention. Acceptance of the administration's pronouncement of auto bailout success demands profound gullibility or willful ignorance. If proper judgment is to be passed, then all of the bailout's costs and benefits must be considered. Otherwise, calling the bailout a success is like applauding the recovery of a drunken driver after an accident while ignoring the condition of the family he severely maimed. The lasting implications of the bailout will depend on whether or not Americans ultimately accept the narrative that the bailout was a success. If it is considered a success, the threshold for interventions will have been lowered, and Americans will have to judge even more bailouts in the future. If it is considered a failure, as it should be, the lasting implications will be less destructive because the threshold that tempts interventionists will be higher. On that score, contrary to what the administration would have the public believe, gauging the success of the GM bailout requires consideration of more than just the ratio of finances recouped over financial outlays. There are numerous other costs that don't factor into that equation. If the bailout is considered a success, some of the lasting implications likely will include the following. 1, an increase in government interventions and bailouts of politically important entities. 2, fear-mongering will be considered an effective technique to stifle debate and enable a stampede toward the politically expedient outcomes. 3, Americans will be more willing to extend powers without serious objection to the executive branch that we would not extend in the absence of a perceived crisis. 4, a greater diversion of productive assets is likely to occur from productive assets to political ends, such as resources for research and development and engineering, to lobbying and lawyering. 5, a greater uncertainty to the business climate as the rule of law is weakened and higher risk premiums are assigned to U.S. economic activity. Less prudent decision-making from Ford Motor Company, for example, knowing that it has banked its bailout. A greater push for the administration for a comprehensive national industrial policy, and less aversion to subsidization of chosen industries abroad. The objection to the auto bailout was not that the federal government wouldn't be able to marshal adequate resources to help GM. The most serious concerns were about the consequences of that intervention, the undermining of the rule of law, the property confiscations, the politically driven decisions, and the distortions of market signals. Any verdict on the auto bailout must take these crucial considerations into account. GM's recent profits speak only to the fact that politicians committed more than $50 billion to the task of subsidizing and reconfiguring GM. With debts expunged, cash infused, inefficiencies severed, ownership reconstituted, sales rebates underwritten, and political obstacles steamrolled, all in the midst of a recovery in U.S. auto demand, only the most incompetent operations could fail to make profits. But taxpayers are still short a minimum of $10 to $20 billion, depending on the price that the government's 500 million shares of GM will fetch. That is a lot of public money in the balance. Nevertheless, the administration should divest as soon as possible without regard to the stock price. Keeping the government's tentacles around a large firm and an important industry will keep the door open wider to industrial policy and will deter market-driven decisions throughout the industry, possibly keeping the brakes on the recovery. Yes, there will be a significant loss to taxpayers, but the right lesson to learn from this chapter in history is that government interventions carry real economic costs, only some of which are readily measurable. Thank you.